Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the 40th Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani. My name is Anna Page. I'm the Director of Programming at the festival, and I'm honored to welcome you to this special conversation with Bassam Tariq here today, the director of Mogul, Mowgli. We are really excited to be having this conversation today, and I want to thank you all for watching. I also want to thank all of our sponsors at the festival for supporting HIFF this year, and most especially want to extend a special mahalo to the Vilcek Foundation. The Vilcek Foundation are our co-presenters of the New American Perspectives program, and it's really with their support that we're able to bring amazing films and discussions like this to you. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce a member of the Vilcek Foundation to say a few words, but really quick, just want to remind everyone that you can still vote for this film as part of our HIFF Audience Award. If you're interested in voting, you can vote at hawaiinewsnow.com/HIFF. So that's how you vote for this and all of your favorite films at the festival. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shihan Udarana from the Vilcek Foundation.
Thanks, Anna. We are so thrilled to present the New American Perspectives program this year as part of HIFF40. The Vilcek Foundation was established in 2000 by Jan and Maritza Vilcek, both immigrants from former Czechoslovakia, to help honor and celebrate the many contributions immigrants make to the arts, to culture, and to society in the United States. Since 2007, we have partnered with HIFF to present a program that highlights and shares the work of foreign-born filmmakers and artists with the festival's audiences. One of the goals of New American Perspectives is to create a platform to build dialogue about identity and representation in film and media. This year, we are delighted to feature Bassam Tariq's Mogul Mowgli as part of our program. As the director of the film and co-writer with Riz Ahmed, Bassam brought his own perspective, insight, and experience to bear in creating this powerful piece. We hope you enjoy the film as much as we did, and we are grateful to HIFF for connecting us with Bassam for New American Perspectives 2020. And back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Shay. So Bassam, again, big mahalo for being with us today. I wanted to open by asking you a little bit about the inception of this project. I know that you co-wrote the film with the film star, Riz Ahmed, and I wanted to find out a little bit about how that collaboration came about and how the concept for the film really came together.
Yeah, so we became fast friends when he was shooting The Night Of in New York. And I had made my first film, These Birds Walk. And at the time when the film had just had its release, and I was working at a butchery. So we met actually at my butchery. So it was a really cool place to kind of like have a first conversation. And we had met through my co-director of These Birds Walk. And he had a liking to the film. And we just kind of had this desire to really make something together. And we both lived these lives that were very similar and also very different. Of course, he's from Wembley in London. I'm from Queens, working class kid. Him, very similar working class kid. So we had this kind of anxious drive that was like pushing us. And we just needed to find the right way to really connect, to start building something. And I think the idea of Mogul Mowgli came, I think, after we did this trip to Pakistan together. We were like, okay, let's go to Pakistan to see what it's like if we started to collaborate and just like do some research on the ground to learn more about Qawwali music, to learn a little bit more about our heritage and where we come from. So we started piecing some of this stuff together, and we realized that we could tell something really exciting in London after I made a trip there with him. And I was like, I think there's the story would need to take place here. So we started just writing, sending ideas back and forth to each other. And it was always a very open process. Like we always knew that he was gonna act in it, and I knew that I was gonna direct it. And it was actually, the funny thing is that he took a writing credit, I would say, 2 weeks before we started shooting. And that was like, I was actually pushing him to take the writing credit because I really wanted I wanted to honor this process of us working together on this film. And he was with me every step of the way. And also the lyrics are all his. And so it was really important for that element of his contribution to be very present for me as well.
Right. Yeah, it seemed it's a very collaborative effort from the get-go. So there's no reason, of course, that it wasn't a mutual sort of effort. So, you know, building on that, and I was actually going to ask about like how you connected, because Riz is from the UK and you grew up in Queens, and you know how that works. But I think you just, you know, answered that question. I also wanted to ask, so with the development of the story and the script, I know, Riz has spoken about in interviews about some elements of the script really reflecting his own personal experiences or internal conflicts, especially in, terms of, all of the, that Zed's illness is really a metaphor for sort of an internal conflict. That's the thing that he's also noted. So I was wondering if you really personally resonate with that sense as well.
Yeah, I think the illness trajectory in the film is actually very close to both our lives and stuff that's happened within our family members. We like to also keep the privacy of the people that are close to us, and also I think there's a general fear of us putting too much of a name on these things. But I think what we do, it's like the name of the illness was something that we always wanted to make sure we didn't do. But we wanted to make sure that it was real. And it's actually based on a factual, scientific data, this idea that migrants or people that are immigrants, when they come to new areas, their children generally have a higher propensity to have an autoimmune illness. And that's because of people that come from hot temperatures moving to cold places, or cold moving to hot. What happens is the body's having trouble adjusting, so the body starts attacking itself. So I would say that there are many people in my family that have different kinds of autoimmune illnesses. And it's not necessarily to make it also a thing to sob over, but actually it's kind of a really, I think, fascinating thing for us to look into of whoa, okay, wait, is this idea of migration, how that actually affects our body? And then also cinematically, we thought this was a real interesting tool for us to then start talking about illness and also talk about how we can use this idea of our body attacking itself to even start going into these deeper ideas of epigenetics, right? Which is this idea of ancestral trauma, inherited trauma from our past. And I think that actually helps with migration, because so much of the trajectory of migration is unfortunately a traumatic experience sometimes. So I think it's stuff that we don't talk about. So that was also something that we felt that okay, how do we come to terms with a lot of these things that have happened to us, whether it's us not wanting to confront it, and because it's been held in for so many generations, it now comes to head in a moment like this.
Right. So there's that intergenerational trauma aspect. There's also at the same time the issues surrounding migration. And although you spoke about the physical part of that, physical migration going to
I'm just laughing because I'm just realizing this is so. It sounds like we've written a fucking term paper. When I talk about
no. But
the white paper on.
on these things. It doesn't have to be that done, philosophical, but you're looking at these sort of issues of migration, and what you spoke about just now was a lot of the physical or physiological impacts of that, right? Yeah. But I was wondering also if you saw that in terms of sort of a metaphor for maybe psychological impact of trying to, that conflict of identity, or conflict of acceptance, and these different sort of internal issues as well.
Yeah, I think the driving force for the film for Riz and I, it's so much at the start was I was just yo, I'm afraid I'm gonna become irrelevant. I'm a dad now. I've got a kid. I run a butchery now. I don't know if I'll ever make another film. And he's man, I feel that same way. There are all these young rappers coming out. I feel I'm this old head now. I was whoa, we both feel this way. And it's because there's always this feeling there can only be one, right? And that's when we were wait, this is really interesting. We need to dig deeper into this. So what happens if you have this desire to break out? Because there's also this fear of becoming irrelevant. It's just something that's really in us, and I think it's this larger acceptance that we want from the culture. And it's a funny thing, right? Because the film's about to come out in the UK right now, and all I'm doing is I'm sitting there like an idiot, just refreshing the feed to see what critics in the UK think, right? What 5 or 10 people in the UK, what they think might determine the certain Rotten Tomatoes. It's ridiculous, right? But in a way, I put so much weight on other people. What's the phrase I'm looking for? For other people to kind of validate my filmmaking, right? And I'm trying hard to resist that, right? But at the same time, I feel I need that validation. So it's that balance that I think we're also looking for, because I think there's also a desire that when we were making this film, I kept on telling Riz, it's we need to give ourselves permission to trip up, to make mistakes. And it's not I don't want to make a perfect film. I feel that's whatever, right? There's something so beautiful about the imperfect, like the perfect imperfect, right? This idea like of, I remember they would do this a lot in like mosques where they build these beautiful mosques, but then on one side of it, they would like just completely mess everything up. And the reason why they did that was because they believe that God is perfect. And they know that any deed that they do is going to be imperfect in comparison to something that is perfect. So let's go have a part of this that kind of celebrates our own imperfection, which I think is so beautiful and so freeing. And that's a part of like, when it comes into like, I'd say these ideas of representation and identity politics, that because we've made this film with, you know, public funds from the BBC, Cinereach, right? These are organizations that we love, that we care about, that we want to continue to build with. They took a huge risk to make this film, right? With like all brown actors, a brown lead, a brown writer, brown director. You know, we had like, it was like more than half of the HODs, the heads of department, were women, right? Like I think it was like 60% were women or 70%, which was something important because we knew this was such a male-dominated film, but I wanted to make sure that our DP was a woman so she could have a very interesting look on the male body and also fragile masculinity, which is something that I think travels or is a really like kind of reoccurring theme in my work. But when everyone takes this risk with us, there's this fear then of messing up that then we're going to maybe close the doors for other filmmakers, which is something that like I get really worried about, because I want to make sure that like, if anything, we're opening the door wider so more people can come in. Because the thing is that when you make a film like this, you want to be able to give other people after you want to give them the permission to take those risks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I think, you know, in that way, you're very successful, not just because this is a unique film, because it's featuring an all brown cast and you as a director and all of these sort of things that may be, you know, breaking bounds in a lot of ways, but also because it's a unique and in many ways very experimental film. So it's also, you know, just from a cinematic and a filmmaking standpoint, it's a very it's not out of the box, so to speak, and breaking sort of some new bounds with the surrealist, you know, style of the film. So even just looking at it from that aspect, you know, I think that you were, you know, it felt like you were, you know, stretching or, you know, trying to be bold in that step. I don't know if you would agree.
I mean, it's funny when you make it, you just go, okay, this is, you know, when you're in it, you're like, cool, but it's hard to watch when you're still so close to it, you know. So I don't know, haven't sat through it in a while.
You're not there yet.
No, I'm not there. I need maybe a few years, and then I'll watch it. Yeah.
Well, you know, I want to circle back in a minute, maybe to the more like surrealist aspect of the film. But in the meantime, I do want to also touch base on the cultural pieces that were included in the film. I know that you went to Pakistan and you did research, and that you really wanted to pay homage to your family, to your culture. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you went about including those elements and the importance of that to you.
So I think the goal of making sure that we were adding different parts of our culture was to really, like I feel like we come from such a vast and weird and wild culture, right? Like we have this huge thing about shrines, and it's like I've got a weird, fun, like disco vibe. We're like big on music and different kinds of music, and it goes from the sacred and the profane. It's a really exciting thing of like, it's like gospel and jazz, and it's been around for 800 years. So we want to pull from things that like, that were always there in our culture in the periphery, but I think recently, either for political reasons or whatever, have been kind of taken away from us. So we're trying to like reclaim these things and also use them as like a roadmap of how can we actually continue to contribute to the language of cinema, because cinema is still such a young art form, right? Film is so young, and we should be experimenting more and allowing us to see what we can do with the medium, and not just kind of sit and be like, okay, great, this is a 3-act structure and blah, 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 blah. And I think because we're in this age of, you know, where so much of filmmaking is monetized and capitalized on, that people have created these structures so it's easier to monetize them. And, you know, they've created ways as vehicles for people to watch these things, right? That's how you get these films financed. But so much of the independent spirit is about like, okay, how can we continue to blow shit up? How do we like do things differently? I mean, you guys showed Patrick Wang's early film In the Family. right?
Yeah, I love
You guys
that
are one of
film.
the first places. Yeah, Patrick Wang's a friend. And like, I remember when I saw In the Family, I was like so blown away by it. And I was like, why isn't everyone seeing this film? You know what I mean? And that to me is like, here's somebody that's trying to explore a new way of cinema. And this is only a film that Patrick Wang could have made. So I feel like we need more of that. And we need to be celebrating more of that, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of, I mean, that kind of this specific program at HIFF, New American Perspectives, it's in celebration of new voices, people that are, you know, sort of doing new things and on the cutting edge. So yeah, right. It's a young medium, and there's many different directions to go in that have not been explored yet. And so in this film, I think part of the more experimental elements of the film are, you know, the surrealist sort of hallucinatory dream sequences, or maybe not dream sequences, let's not call them that. But those elements towards the end of the film, it becomes in some ways a psychological thriller, you know, at that point when body. So I wanted to find out more about what your references were in creating that, you know, section, those sequences in the film.
Yeah, I love Bresson's work. I think Bresson's, he has this one film, I can't believe that it's at the tip of my tongue. I'm actually going to look it up really quick. It's the one that takes place in the prison. I think it's a Man Escaped. Yes. So Bresson has a film called Man Escaped. And so much of it is this man, and it's very simple. He needs to get out of prison, right? And it's so beautifully put together. You barely see the guards, but you hear them around the corner. It's about faith. It's about so many different things. And I felt like I looked at that. One of the other filmmakers that I love is Carlos Regadas, and I loved Post Tenebras Lux. As wild and weird as it is, like it felt like it was saying something so special and fragmented. And there's a version of this film that was actually super fragmented. It was just like one of those things that was like it might have been unwatchable, right? Like there was a version of this film that was like that. But I think we also, like Riz and I, I really have a desire to connect with audiences. Like I think one of the reasons why I love filmmaking is the ability to have something that's accessible where anyone can sit and watch. And of course, I do think that there are things in the film that maybe like might go over people's heads, or they may not follow on everything, but I also think that's okay. Like there's so much of Tarkovsky's work that I may not completely understand, where it'll go into like long, like free verse of poetry, and then it'll go into this and that. And like Tarkovsky is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I don't understand everything, but it still moves me and it still stays with me. And I think that's okay. And I feel like we give that pass sometimes to white filmmakers, right, to European filmmakers, when we don't necessarily, maybe if something goes over our head, but when it comes to work of ours, I think there is this fear sometimes with us being like a bit experimental, or like if we're doing something that might seem like it's like a coded language, or it's like stuff that's like only it's like a few people would understand. It's like, well, you know, this film's hard to, it's inaccessible, right? And I think, so that's kind of also the dance that comes into when I look at some of these references, because I have to actually look at people of color as well. So I look at Killer of Sheep, Charles Burnett's film, as one of those like really important moments in my life when I saw that film, because here's somebody that made something that was so daring and experimental and so simple at the same time. It's like, I'm going to talk about the dignity of working class Black people in the 70s. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it in this way that I know with the people that I have access to. And it's unapologetic. He builds a language that's wholly him. And I feel like that's kind of the thing that I want to look at as like, okay, like these are the sort of the people that I can look to take, you know, to take those risks. Or Abbas Kiarostami with Close Up, or, you know, Taste of Cherry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting to sort of an authenticity with your artistic vision, your truth that you're sharing in that process.
Yeah. I think there's always that thing of like, but also making sure that like, but if you're vulnerable and you're honest, I think it'll still connect, right? I think that's kind of the thing too, is like, I'm afraid of making things too opaque. And I feel like if this is too opaque and people aren't connecting to it, then I don't know if I've done my job, right? Like there is a desire that I have to make things that connect with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think you struck that balance. You know, there's elements. You struck that balance. I think that's what
Let's see.
Yeah. So, I know we don't have like a great deal of time today. I don't want to keep you on too long, but I do want to ask you before we go, what is up next? Like, what are you working on now? Now that this film is done, I know you're still heavy in promotion with it just coming out in the UK. But what are your sort of future plans? And do you plan to work with Riz or collaborate with Riz in the future?
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, so Riz and I, we're like really close friends, and we're like spitballing things, and we'll see what happens. I think right now, it's a really interesting time in the world, and I realized like in terms of what I'm working on next, it's really just homeschooling my kids and just trying to like direct that project and make sure that it's, that my kids are still sane and learning.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's more than a full-time job right now doing that, as I know parents going through this period are experiencing as well. So, I please keep us posted on what comes up next. We're very excited to see what comes up next. I think this is an amazing debut. This is your feature-length narrative debut. So I think it's very impressive, and we'll wait to see what comes next. So thank you.
I know